Hi, my dearest. I wanted to share with you a few more decks that I love to use when it comes to ancestral communication. And the whole point for this video, and it's going to be fast and it's going to be direct and to the point, is because I had a sweet soul ask me what other decks did I recommend, because she really liked using like the Hoodoo Tarot and the Afro-Brazilian Tarot. And I can imagine there's a few other like typical tarot cards that we tend to go to when we're trying to work with ancestral communication. But I wanted to share with you from a woman who practices that a lot, from different avenues and different perspectives, some things to consider and some decks that I would recommend for those considerations. So when it comes to speaking to our ancestors, I do believe that the deck that you use will depend as to what your goal is. So sometimes you're looking to understand who this ancestor is, learn more about them to maybe mend a relationship with them, understand why they were the way they were or treated somebody the way they did. Sometimes it's to talk to them directly, not understand them so much. So are you trying to understand them, or do you want to talk to them and receive answers? Those are two different things. And yes, they can happen at this same time-ish, but usually you're trying to do one or the other. Not often are you doing both at the immediate one time. The other thing may be just like, are you trying to get like information or wisdom from ancestral collective? Because sometimes when we're thinking, hey, I want to talk to my ancestors, we're not looking for one. We're just looking for the collective soup of a hug from our ancestors. And I love using tarot or oracle or things like that for those purposes. So I'm going to show you a couple that I love to use, why I love to use them, and let's keep it rolling. So one that I like to use is directly affiliated with my personal cultural background. Now, it is not crucial that you use cultural specific imagery in regards to your ancestral communication, unless that's just your bag. Some people, that's exactly the way they are. However, I would recommend cultural specific tarot cards if you're looking to understand that person specifically, not just chatting with them. Because having some of the cultural references peppered in the tarot cards will help you make connections that maybe you wouldn't have gone to first. So for instance, one of the decks that I do when I'm actually trying to understand and talk to my African lineage, I'll use the Afro Tarot. That for me is spot on, because my ancestors did look like that in my family. Like that's the lineage that I come from. So for me, that is, well, maybe not that one, but for me, that is absolutely appropriate to my ancestral line. So that's one that I use to talk or to learn more about a particular ancestor. That maybe I don't have a relationship already with. Another one that I'll sometimes use depending on how I'm feeling, or if I'm needing a particular kind of medicine from the African side of my family, then I'll use, sorry, I didn't tell you what this one was. This is the Dust to Onyx Tarot, and I have the mini version, but this one has still very African-centric imagery, but these are a little bit more on the collage end, and so this for me turns into collective Afro side. So that's why I will lean to this deck to just kind of get wisdom from that side of the family. Now, if I'm also doing collective kind of style work or questions, not so much specific, then I'll use my Centennial Rider-Waite-Smith. That's a simple, easy deck. I'm not looking for the cultural reference. I'm just trying to use that deck to facilitate the language, facilitate the communication. It's more of the information that's important, not necessarily the cards that are important. I know I'm talking a mile a minute, so I'll try to condense but get to the point. Cards that I probably wouldn't use is like animal focused decks. You can still get information, like, and talk to your ancestors and get information out of it. So I'm not saying it's completely useless. I would just say if you're trying to understand your ancestry, your lineage, your an elder for some reason, using an animal based deck may not give you the nuance of information that you need. I'm not saying it's not possible. Do you, honey, sweet pea, do your thing. Just, I would probably try something else. In addition, when I'm looking for like pea soup collective information from my ancestors, I use decks of cards that I don't have a real good relationship with. And one that I do that with is called the 5 Cent Tarot. And the reason that I use it is because there's so many words on these cards. So even in the process of me like, hey, which deck should I use? I pulled a card out of this deck, and I don't know, actually, this is not the card. There it is. I have to flip the deck over. It's a Interesting set of cards. You've probably seen the imagery. If you haven't, there we go. There you go, a little bit better. This deck has language and words all over it. And so sometimes, especially when I'm in a highly emotional state, I need to get as far away from my intuition as possible. And so I will use cards that already have words attached to them and just leave it to the gods, leave it to the ancestors to have them communicate with me the deck or the card or the stuff that I need to hear. Because I'm not doing any interpreting. I'm not doing any work at that moment. I need them to tell me. So those are some of the cards that I use. Sorry, the reason I just made a face is because my son's school just called me, so I'm going to be annoyed here in a little bit is what's going to happen. Another deck that I sometimes like to use is the Relative Tarot. And this is more inclined for, like, if I'm just trying to understand the ancestors on my Caucasian side of my family, but that is a little bit more specific to the 18 and 1900s. And it's just because sometimes it's fun to kind of have imagery that's already a little bit affiliated with that and is kind of still steeped in the Rider-Waite-Smith stuff. So that's one of the things that I like to use there. So that is the Relative Tarot by Carrie Paris, if you'd love that reference. Last couple, and it's about two. I love using the Santa Muerte Tarot because not so much for the cultural reference, but I have a grandfather who loved and lived this imagery. And so I use this deck a lot to talk to him directly. So this is a person-specific tarot deck that I use to talk to that one person, and it works for us. So that's why I use that deck. Also, something else that I will sometimes do is just use completely atypical tarot cards, because the information that is gained from using different than normal tarot cards gives you different than normal insights. Our lives, our perspectives are nuanced and detailed, and there's so much to it. So having a deck of cards that doesn't exactly look like it's supposed to will do so much to kind of give color to the conversation, give color, nuance, give meaning to the person that you're speaking to or the circumstances that you're trying to understand. So I'm a big fan, big fan of using atypical tarot cards for ancestral communication. I think it can do wonders to kind of understand what's going on with a particular loved one or relative. Not to dismiss Oracle, but often I will use Oracle to kind of add, again, like additional information, additional notes, subtleties. If you happen to have the Uncover Your Past Lives Oracle deck, you could totally use it to ask specific questions and get a different kind of answer. So this deck is an awesome, massive collection of information, stories, synopsis, things like that. So let me give you an example. This is just one card, okay? So top card, if you're shuffling the deck and you pull the card, this has a location on it. This has a trauma thing on it. This has a faith base on it. This has a love on it, or a type of love. And so sometimes you might be asking, like, how did you pass away, for instance? And then you pull a card. Well, you got murder. Okay, so something happened at the hands of somebody else, and then maybe how this card landed right side up or next to something, you notice that, oh, maybe there were a witness to a murder of some sort and something happened. It gives you nuance. It gives you, like, more information. And this deck in particular, this deck in particular just has so much to it. So if you're doing past life work, there's, you know, ages and types of death and how they died, but you can totally adapt this to any current circumstance that you're working in. So this is one of those decks that I highly recommend to have in the collection, just so that you can get more than just the subtle, soft details, because that's the easy stuff. That's the stuff that most people can hit, most people can dig in on. But often when you're trying to understand why somebody is the way they are, you need to go a little bit deeper under the surface. You need to, like, peel the skin back and understand their lived perspective, their cultural perspective, their unique lived experience, and listen to how you feel and the information that is showing up, so that you can kind of get that story as though you lived it. Because when you understand that, then you not only are you opening your like Rolodex of information in your head about who they are and who you are, but that's also improving the catalog of information that's in your head when you're reading for others, or when you're reading in different circumstances or for other situations. So I know I spoke a mile a minute. I hope that made sense. If it didn't, please feel free to throw your questions and your comments down below. If you feel like reaching out, leave a comment. I'd love to hear maybe a deck that you would have included in here, and I would totally love to continue this conversation. So thank you so much for hanging out with me. Bye.